The morning I learned my husband had never planned for me to keep our house started with the sound of church bells drifting across Maple Hollow. It was the kind of quiet town where everyone knew which porch lights stayed on after midnight and who baked the best apple pie every October. People smiled when they passed each other, waved from pickup trucks, and believed secrets couldn't survive for long. They were wrong. My name is Emily Carter, and 3 weeks before everything fell apart, my husband Ryan and I bought a beautiful white farmhouse on the edge of town. It overlooked rolling fields, an old red barn, and a narrow river that shimmered every evening beneath the setting sun. I paid for most of it. The money came from my grandmother, who had spent 40 years running the town's little bookstore. Before she passed away, she told me, a home should always belong to the person who protects it. I never imagined I'd need protection from my own husband. Ryan couldn't stop talking about our future. He wanted chickens, a vegetable garden, a workshop in the old barn, children running through the backyard. Every word sounded sincere. Every smile looked real. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, while I was unpacking dishes in the kitchen, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. Normally I ignored unknown calls. For some reason, I answered. Mrs. Carter? The voice belonged to an older man. This is Walter Hayes. I sold you the farmhouse. I remembered him immediately. A retired history teacher with silver hair and gentle eyes who had lived there with his wife for nearly 30 years before moving closer to their daughter. I hope I'm not disturbing you, he said quietly. No, not at all. There was a long silence. I made a mistake before handing over the property. My stomach tightened. What kind of mistake? I forgot to disconnect one of my indoor security cameras. I blinked. It was hidden inside an antique wall clock in the living room. I only realized it yesterday when my cloud account sent me an alert. Another pause. I watched the recording before deleting it. His voice became heavier. And I think you need to see it. Cold spread through my chest. What did you see? I'd rather not explain over the phone. His words came slowly. Please come alone. Don't tell your husband. I've saved the footage for you. When the call ended, I stood perfectly still. Across the room, Ryan was laughing with his mother, Linda, as they measured curtains for the front windows. She pointed toward the fireplace. He nodded immediately. They looked comfortable. Almost as if they had already imagined living there together. Ryan noticed me watching. You okay? He asked with his usual warm smile. I forced one back. I'm just going into town for a while. What for? We're out of light bulbs. It was the first lie I'd ever told my husband. As I climbed into my car and looked once more at the farmhouse glowing beneath the gray afternoon sky, one thought refused to leave my mind. Maybe I didn't really know the man I had married. Walter Hayes welcomed me into his small cottage on the opposite side of Maple Hollow without asking a single unnecessary question. His living room smelled faintly of cedar wood and fresh coffee. Family photographs lined the shelves, each one reminding me that this was a man who valued honesty more than comfort. I'm sorry, he said quietly as he placed a flash drive beside his laptop. If I'd noticed that camera before closing, none of this would have happened. You don't have to apologize. I wish I did. He turned the screen toward me. I'll let the recording speak for itself. The video began. The timestamp showed the previous Monday. I had been working late at the hospital that evening. Ryan unlocked the front door. A minute later, Linda walked inside carrying a folder. She didn't even look around. She walked through the farmhouse like someone inspecting property she already owned. I still can't believe she paid almost 70% herself, Linda said, setting the folder on the kitchen island. Ryan laughed. She never questioned it. Of course she didn't, Linda replied. People like Emily believe love is stronger than paperwork. They both smiled. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of quicken. Sometimes the worst shock doesn't make you panic. It makes you perfectly still. Linda opened the folder. The attorney says everything can happen gradually. First the refinance, then limited authority, and eventually you'll control every decision connected to the property. Ryan nodded. She'll sign. You sound awfully confident. I'm her husband. He shrugged. She trusts me with everything. Linda leaned closer. Good. Trust is useful. As long as you don't waste it. Neither of them laughed. That somehow made it worse. They weren't joking. They were planning. Methodically. Calmly. As if they had rehearsed this conversation many times before. Ryan walked toward the living room window and looked across the fields. My biggest concern isn't Emily. It's whether she'll actually read the documents. Linda smiled. She never reads contracts. She always asks you to explain them. And you'll explain exactly what she needs to hear. The room suddenly felt too small. Every memory I'd built with Ryan flashed through my mind. The proposal beside the lake. Our wedding. The nights he held me after my grandmother died. Had any of it been real? Or had I simply been convenient? The recording continued. Linda wandered through the farmhouse, pointing at different rooms. This office will become your study. We'll renovate the kitchen. And the guest room. She paused. Could become mine whenever I visit. Ryan didn't argue. Instead, he smiled. I was thinking the same thing. Walter quietly stopped the video. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, he slid the flash drive across the table. I copied every recording. There are several more. You should keep them. I stared at the tiny device resting in my hand. It looked insignificant. Yet it carried enough truth to destroy my entire marriage. Walter cleared his throat. You still have one advantage, Emily. I looked up. They have no idea, you know. Driving back through Maple Hollow, I replayed every conversation I'd ever had with Ryan. Every compliment. Every promise. Every gentle smile. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. If Ryan and Linda believed I was the easiest person in town to fool, then I would let them keep believing it. Walking back into the farmhouse that evening felt strangely ordinary. Ryan was standing in the kitchen, unpacking glasses as if nothing in the world had changed. Did you find the light bulbs? He asked. I smiled naturally. The store was out. I'll check again tomorrow. He kissed my forehead. For years that simple gesture had made me feel safe. This time, it felt rehearsed. Over the next several days, I became someone I'd never been before. An observer. Instead of listening to Ryan's words, I watched his habits. Every afternoon he collected the mail before I came home. Every bank statement disappeared into his office before I even saw it. Whenever I offered to organize our paperwork, he smiled. I've got it, Em. You already do enough. I used to think he was being thoughtful. Now I wondered what he was hiding. Linda's visits became impossible to ignore. She arrived almost every day carrying coffee, homemade cookies, or another excuse to stop by. Yet somehow every conversation drifted back to the house. The mortgage. Future renovations. Insurance. Property taxes. Ownership. One evening I walked into the living room unexpectedly. They stopped talking. Ryan looked at me with the same relaxed smile. We were just discussing paint colors. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. I no longer believed anything without proof. 3 days later Ryan came home carrying a thick blue folder. He placed it carefully on the dining table. Good news. I looked up from my laptop. What happened? The bank approved a refinancing package. He sounded excited. They found a way to lower our monthly payment. Linda happened to be sitting beside him. Of course she was. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. This is wonderful, dear. Almost every young couple does it. Ryan opened the folder. Just a few signatures. I looked at the stack of papers without touching them. Every instinct told me the real agreement wasn't on the first page. I smiled anyway. I'd love to read everything first. For the first time in days. Ryan hesitated. Only for a second. But I saw it. Of course, he replied quickly. No hurry. Linda's smile barely moved. Just don't spend all week reading legal language. It's terribly boring. I laughed softly. You know me. I like understanding what I sign. That evening, after Ryan fell asleep upstairs, I carried the folder into the kitchen. Only one small lamp illuminated the room. Page after page looked ordinary. Interest rates. Insurance. Payment schedules. Then, near the middle of the packet, I found it. A clause granting Ryan limited authority to make future property decisions on my behalf. The wording was careful. Almost invisible. Anyone reading too quickly would never notice. I quietly photographed every single page with my phone before placing everything back exactly where Ryan had left it. Then I opened a brand new email account that nobody knew existed. One by one, the photos disappeared into my private archive. If Ryan and Linda were building a case against me, I had just started building one against them. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney before driving to work. His name was Daniel Brooks, and his office sat above a quiet hardware store in the neighboring town of Cedar Creek. He didn't waste time. After watching Walter's recordings and reading every page I'd photographed, he folded his hands and looked directly at me. Emily. This isn't just a refinance. I was afraid you'd say that. He nodded. The document gives your husband the legal authority to act for you in future property matters. On paper, it looks harmless. He tapped the highlighted paragraph. But once it's signed, additional documents could slowly transfer more control. Without another confrontation? Exactly. My stomach tightened. So if I'd signed, you could have lost control of the farmhouse piece by piece. The room fell silent. Daniel leaned back. The dangerous part isn't that the paperwork is illegal. It's that it's written for someone who completely trusts the person handing it to them. I stared at my grandmother's ring. She used to say that trust should be earned every day. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped asking whether Ryan still deserved mine. Daniel opened a fresh folder. We're going to protect the property before anyone realizes you know. Can we? We still have time. Over the next hour, we prepared everything. He filed documents preventing any transfer without my personal approval. He added legal protections requiring independent verification before ownership could ever change. By the time I left his office, the farmhouse was already safer than Ryan could possibly imagine. But I wasn't finished. I don't want to stop them, I said. Daniel looked up. I want them to believe they're winning. A slow smile appeared on his face. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. He explained the plan. I would keep acting like nothing had changed. I'd ask innocent questions. Take my time reading the paperwork. Smile. Agree. Meanwhile, Daniel would quietly secure every legal safeguard behind the scenes. The more comfortable they become, he said, the more careless they'll be. Driving home, I practiced my smile in the rearview mirror. It looked convincing. Even to me. That evening Ryan greeted me with flowers. Thought you deserved these. I thanked him. Kissed his cheek. Cooked dinner. Asked about his day. He relaxed almost immediately. Across the table, Linda raised her wine glass. I think everything is finally coming together. Ryan smiled at her. It won't be much longer. Neither of them noticed that my phone, resting face down beside my purse, was quietly recording every word. Daniel's prediction proved correct. The more patient I became, the more confident Ryan and Linda grew. Within a few days, they had stopped hiding their excitement. Linda arrived one Saturday morning carrying paint samples and furniture catalogs. She spread everything across my dining table. I've been thinking, she said, holding up a cream-colored paint swatch. The living room would feel much brighter after we remove that wall. Ryan nodded immediately. And we could finally build the office in the barn. Linda smiled. Exactly. Listening to them was surreal. Neither one asked what I wanted. They spoke about the farmhouse as if every decision already belonged to them. I simply sipped my coffee. Those are interesting ideas. Ryan reached over and squeezed my hand. See? I told Mom you'd come around. That afternoon, while Linda wandered through the upstairs bedrooms measuring windows, Ryan joined me on the back porch. The sun was setting over the fields, bathing everything in warm orange light. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You know, he said softly, once all the paperwork is finished, life will be so much easier. What do you mean? You won't have to worry about any financial decisions anymore. He smiled. I'll take care of everything. His voice sounded gentle. Protective. Exactly the tone that had made me trust him for years. I lowered my eyes. That does sound nice. It is. You'll wake up one day and everything will already be handled. You probably won't even notice how smoothly it happened. My heart skipped. Those words. They weren't about helping me. They were about replacing me. Quietly. Without resistance. Without questions. I kept my expression calm while my phone, hidden inside my cardigan pocket, captured every syllable. Ryan had no idea he had just handed me something far more valuable than a confession. He had revealed intent. Later that evening, after Linda finally left, Ryan placed the blue folder on the kitchen counter again. The notary is available Monday evening. He smiled casually. Think you'll be ready? I looked at the papers for several seconds before answering. Then I smiled back. Yes. I think Monday works perfectly. The relief on his face was impossible to miss. As soon as he went upstairs, I locked myself in the bathroom and called Daniel. He believes I'm signing, I whispered. Daniel didn't sound surprised. Good. Everything is already in place. So Monday. Monday, he interrupted calmly, is when they discover the farmhouse was never theirs to take. For the first time since Walter's phone call. I allowed myself to smile. Not because I had one. But because I finally knew the ending would belong to me. Monday arrived with clear skies and an uneasy silence that seemed to hang over Maple Hollow. Ryan came home earlier than usual carrying a bottle of expensive wine. I thought tonight deserved a little celebration, he said with a grin. By 6 o'clock, Linda arrived wearing a navy blue dress instead of her usual jeans. She carried a homemade apple pie. New beginnings, she said cheerfully. The dining room looked beautiful. Candles flickered across the table. Soft jazz played through the speakers. Anyone looking through the windows would have seen the picture of a perfect family. Only I knew it was a performance. Dinner passed slowly. Ryan talked about future vacations. Linda discussed landscaping ideas. She even suggested replacing the old maple tree near the porch because, in her words, it blocks too much sunlight. I almost laughed. She was redesigning a home that would never belong to her. Finally, Ryan stood and disappeared into his office. He returned carrying the familiar blue folder. This shouldn't take long, he said. The notary will be here in a few minutes. Linda's smile widened. I told you everything would work out. Ryan opened the folder and placed the final page in front of me. There. He slid a silver pen across the table. Just one signature. The room became perfectly quiet. I picked up the pen. For a long moment, I simply stared at the signature line. Ryan leaned forward. "It's okay," he said softly. "I've taken care of everything." "I know," I replied. He smiled. He thought those words meant trust. They didn't. Just as I lowered the pen, the doorbell rang. Ryan frowned. "We're not expecting anyone." "I'll get it," I said calmly. When I opened the front door, Daniel Brooks was standing on the porch. Beside him stood a county property officer carrying a leather portfolio. "Good evening, Ms. Carter," Daniel said with a polite smile. "I believe we're right on time." I stepped aside. "Please come in." The conversation inside stopped instantly. Ryan slowly stood from his chair. Linda's smile disappeared. Daniel entered the dining room without raising his voice. "Good evening. My name is Daniel Brooks. I represent Emily Carter." No one spoke. The county officer placed a sealed envelope on the dining table beside the refinance documents. Ryan looked from the envelope to me. Then back to Daniel. "What is this?" Daniel calmly opened his own folder. "It is formal notice that this property has already been placed under legal protection. Any attempt to transfer ownership or obtain authority over it without Ms. Carter's fully informed consent is now legally impossible." The color drained from Ryan's face. Linda gripped the edge of the table. For the first time since this nightmare began, neither of them looked confident anymore. No one moved. The only sound in the room was the soft crackling of the candles. Ryan forced a nervous laugh. "There must be some mistake." Daniel calmly placed several documents on the table. "I don't believe there is." He turned to the county officer, who nodded before setting down a second folder. "These filings were officially recorded 3 days ago." Ryan looked at me. "Emily, what is this?" I met his eyes for the first time that evening. "This," I said quietly, "is me protecting my home." Daniel opened the first folder. "I'd like everyone to look at something." He slid several printed photographs across the table. They were screenshots from Walter Hay's hidden security camera. One showed Ryan and Linda standing in the kitchen. Another captured the blue folder spread across the island. A third froze the exact moment Linda had pointed toward the living room and smiled. Ryan's expression changed instantly. "Where did you get those?" Daniel ignored the question. Instead, he pressed a small button on a digital recorder. Ryan's own voice filled the dining room. "She trusts me with everything." Linda answered a second later. "Good. Trust is useful, as long as you don't waste it." Silence. Daniel stopped the recording. Then he played another. "Once the paperwork is finished, you won't have to worry about financial decisions anymore." Ryan's warm voice echoed through the room. "You'll probably never even notice how smoothly it happened." Linda closed her eyes. Ryan slowly lowered himself into his chair. His confidence was gone. "Emily. I can explain." I shook my head. "No. You can try. But you can't change what you already said." Ryan rubbed both hands across his face. "It wasn't supposed to sound like that." "Then how was it supposed to sound?" He searched for an answer. None came. Linda finally spoke. "This has been completely misunderstood. We only wanted Ryan to manage the property. For the family." I looked at her calmly. "My grandmother left that farmhouse to me. You were making plans for every room before I had even unpacked my boxes." Neither of them answered. Daniel placed one final document on the table. "It also appears," he said evenly, "that Mrs. Linda Carter contacted a mortgage broker before discussing any refinancing with Ms. Carter." He laid printed emails beside the recordings. The timeline is quite revealing. Ryan stared at the papers as though he'd never seen them before. Linda's shoulders sank. For the first time since I'd known her. She had absolutely nothing to say. I took a slow breath. For nearly 2 weeks, I said, I smiled at both of you. I cooked dinner. I thanked you for your advice. I pretended to believe every word. Ryan looked at me in disbelief. You knew. Since the day Walter Hayes called me. The room fell silent once again. Only now. The silence belonged to me. Ryan stared at me as though he no longer recognized the woman sitting across the table. His voice was barely above a whisper. Emily, please. This isn't what you think. I looked at him calmly. Then tell me. When exactly were you planning to tell me about the power of attorney? He opened his mouth. Then closed it again. I was trying to protect us. I almost smiled. Protect us? You told your mother I would never notice. Ryan's shoulders slumped. I know how that sounded. No, I replied quietly. I know exactly how it sounded. Before he could answer, Linda pushed her chair back. This has gone far enough. Her voice was cold now, stripped of every trace of warmth she had shown me over the years. Families make financial decisions together. You've embarrassed my son over paperwork. Daniel looked at her. No, Mrs. Carter. The evidence embarrassed him. She ignored him. Instead, she pointed directly at me. You chose a stranger over your own family. I stood slowly. My family? My grandmother spent her life building that bookstore so I could have a secure future. My family never taught me to lie. My family never asked me to sign documents they hoped I wouldn't read. Linda's face hardened. If you walk away from this marriage, you'll regret it. I met her stare without flinching. I already regret trusting the wrong people. Ryan suddenly stood. His eyes filled with tears. I love you. I know I've made mistakes. But don't throw away 12 years because of this. For a brief moment, I remembered the man I thought I had married. The road trips. The birthday surprises. The quiet evenings on the porch. Those memories were real. At least to me. But trust, once broken, could never return in the same shape. I took a deep breath. I don't hate you, Ryan. I simply don't believe you anymore. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. He lowered his head. Daniel quietly closed his folder. I believe our business here is finished. The county officer gathered the remaining documents. No one tried to stop them. Ryan slowly picked up his coat. He paused beside the front door. I never wanted it to end like this. I answered honestly. Neither did I. He looked at me one last time. Then walked outside into the cool evening. Linda followed without another word. A few seconds later, the front door closed. The farmhouse became completely silent. For the first time since moving into it. It finally felt like home. 3 months later. Spring had finally arrived in Maple Hollow. The old farmhouse looked different now. The porch had been repainted. Fresh flowers filled the garden beds. Behind the barn, rows of tomatoes and herbs stretched across the small vegetable patch my grandmother and I had always dreamed about. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful. The divorce papers had been finalized 6 weeks earlier. Ryan never challenged the property protections Daniel had put in place. He knew he couldn't. Linda never came back. People around town whispered for a while. Small towns always do. But eventually, they found something else to talk about. One quiet Saturday morning, while I was watering the flowers, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a familiar name. Walter Hayes. Good morning, Emily, he said warmly. I was just wondering how the farmhouse is treating you. I smiled. It's finally beginning to feel like mine. I'm glad. There was a brief pause before he continued. You know, after everything happened, I went through the rest of my old cloud storage. I frowned. You found more recordings? No. I found something much nicer. He chuckled softly. My late wife kept a digital journal. Every Christmas she recorded little videos about the house. I stayed silent. She talked about every family that ever lived there. She always hoped the farmhouse would end up with someone who truly loved it. Walter's voice grew quieter. The last recording was made just before we decided to sell. She stood on the porch and said, a house doesn't become a home because of the names on the paperwork. It becomes a home because of the person who protects the love inside it. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. Those words sounded exactly like something my grandmother would have said. Walter laughed gently. I think she would have liked you. I wish I could have met her. You already have. He paused. Every time you chose honesty over fear. After we hung up, I sat alone on the porch for a long time. Watching the sunlight move across the fields. Listening to the wind rustle through the old maple tree that Linda had wanted to cut down. I realized something then. Ryan hadn't taken my future. He had revealed who deserved to be part of it. Sometimes losing the life you imagined is the only way to find the one you were truly meant to live. If you've ever had to choose between trusting someone else and trusting yourself, I hope you choose yourself. Because peace begins the moment you stop ignoring what your heart has known all along. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what you would have done in Emily's place. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories from small-town America. Until next time, take care of yourself. And never underestimate the power of the truth.